We are excited to have the San Francisco Giants here talking about how they're leveraging AI and I'll call workflow automation to really grow the yield out of their content assets. So we're going to kind of talk through what that project was. We're also here by their SI partner who helped facilitate a lot of this workflow opportunities. Have been a longstanding partner of the San Francisco Giants for a while. Sid Napstad from Cutting Edge, and I apologize, this is Paul Hodges III from the San Francisco Giants, heads up productions. So with that, we'll kick in. We know we have a short period of time here, but I think high level last year there was a ton of talk about AI, machine learning. We're going to try to really drill in on how it's being practically used in some very specific use cases by the San Francisco Giants, and hopefully this will give some insight on how this may be applicable to your businesses. So with that, why don't we do a little bit brief background on each other? You want to start, Sig?
I know your background. So, hey everybody, my name's Sig Napstad. I'm the CTO of Alt Systems. First of all, full disclosure, Paul and I are recovering from really bad colds, so if we're a little stopped up here or coughing, please forgive us. But for those of you that don't know Alt Systems, we're LA's premier provider, I'm well now, of color finishing, DI, networking, storage solutions. And earlier this year, we merged with Cutting Edge, headquartered out of San Francisco. And Cutting Edge has core area expertise in file-based workflows. And it's been an honor to work with Paul Hodges and his team for over the last decade as their system integrator and file-based workflow provider.
Paul, you want to tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Sure, yeah. Paul Hodges, so Vice President of SFG Productions. So that's our in-house video team. So we build content for our social platforms as well as our in-stadium video board. I started with the Giants as an intern in 2000. And left in 2014 to go to the Warriors, started Warriors Studio over there, got a championship there, then left and came back to the Giants in 2016, and that's when we started this project that we're about to present to you guys in 2017. So it's been a 2-year project so far for us.
And I'm Ryan Steelberg, I'm president of Veritone. We are a data and analytics driven by AI shop. We service about a couple hundred different partners and all kind of areas of media and entertainment, from studios to professional sports teams. And we also have a significant practice in public safety and justice, trying to catch bad guys with a lot of our tech. So we're excited to be just a partner, I'll call a powerful tool set to really enable what these guys have ideated and sort of put together here. So thanks for hosting us today. All right, let's continue. You want to get a little...
Yeah, so to paint a picture for you guys, in that first go-around with the Giants, we, and this isn't very unique, like we have a lot of tapes that are sitting in a storage locker somewhere. And every baseball, much like sports in general, is a nostalgic game. And so you're always trying to play on that emotion and remembering the past. And as editors and content creators, you're always trying to find some new nugget that has been locked away, and you're trying to unlock that and uncover that. Oops, check. And so we've always been putting a tape in the tape machine, digitizing, and we started doing that I think in 2007, and it got to a point where it was a waste of time. In 2017, what was unique is the stuff has been sitting there deteriorating for a long time, and the picture we had an archivist that saved this material, these tapes back in the 90s. It was all put in boxes. It was about to go to the trash can. And she went out, saved it, pulled all the tapes back. And it's been sitting in storage lockers around the Bay Area in pods and U-Haul storage places for the last, I guess since probably she saved it. And it was in a dire situation. So it was more or less, we needed to save this content or it was going to be gone forever. So as you can look up there, we had a 60-year archive with thousands of hours of footage. And, I'll give you another example. When Will Clark, we were trying to celebrate Will Clark a couple of years ago, and we were going through a file-based, what was that? Data? Not Excel, but FileMaker Pro. Our archivist had a FileMaker Pro. She had written all the material down from the spines. and we were looking for Will Clark footage, and there was a tape that said Goodwill. Figured, hey, this is Goodwill footage. Let's grab it, and it turned out to be a PSA for the Goodwill. So that was the kind of the data. That was our trouble that we were working with, and we realized we needed to digitize this stuff. And at that time, in 2017, when AI was just kind of a buzzword, we had planned essentially to have 13 interns maybe for an entire year, 40 hours a week, sit there and log this stuff. But I think the next slide is the video, right? I have a video for you that kind of like tells this whole project.
I got you. We're techs. We can do this.
Hamilton with the ball moving away from him, tracks it down.
History. The funny thing about history is that no one sees it coming. No one knows when that pivotal moment is walking to the plate or taking the mound. These are the unforgettable moments that we all know. The stories that have shaped Giants history.
I think baseball, more than any other sport, brings us back to our childhood. We spend a lot of time talking about our former players, and I think fans appreciate that part of our business. So saving that history, I think, is really important to us, and I think our fans will appreciate it in the future.
One of the great differentiators are that we've been around 140 years. To see what our parents and grandparents saw and then hand them down to our children and grandchildren. We're caretakers of a franchise that, we believe will be around forever, and it's incumbent on us to hand these images down to future generations.
Walton at first, Bedrosian throws to Sandberg, and the pitch is grounded to second base. Thompson has it, throws to first. It's over. 27 years of waiting have come to an end. The Giants have won the pennant.
What is in those tapes is sort of what is our DNA. It is who we are. A lot of teams don't have the history that we do, and we are so fortunate to have our history, and now to be able to show it better than we ever have been before is so important.
This is a game that you hand down from generation to generation, and that's part of what this project is all about. It's really taking the memories of the past and telling that story to new fans. And for me personally, that's the most exciting part of this.
Now the 2-2 pitch to McCovey. Drive to deep left field. Back goes Crawford. Still going back. It's gone! A grand slam home run! McCovey with the 14th grand slam of his major league career.
A legendary home run heard over the radio. An impossible catch captured on a single reel of film. Or a final out broadcast into our homes. These stories are our legacy. A legacy that, until recently, had become increasingly difficult to preserve.
When we were accumulating all these tapes, we'd often look at this wall of videotape and say, what in the heck are we going to do with all this tape? But the fact that all those games, interviews that we did with early Giants vision, are all being saved. It's pretty remarkable.
We've seen bits and pieces, we've seen highlights over the years from just one game here from the 80s, one game here from the 70s, but to have all of those games and all of those highlights in the tapes, I think we can't even imagine what we're going to find.
What else, Francisco? Are you looking forward to the last day here in Dodger Stadium and going back to your native land of Puerto Rico?
Yeah, so make sure you swing the first pitch so we can get out of here early. And see you later.
He said make sure you swing at the first pitch, get out of here early, and have a 2-hour game.
It's the ability to show the personality of a lot of our players and a lot of the personalities in this game, and what they were like when they weren't on the field, or who our announcers were. And there's so much more that makes up the Giants brand. To be able to preserve that is just critical.
Tom, a lot of things have happened in my life, a lot of great things. I think this is one of the happiest moments, to be managing in the World Series and to be the manager of this great ball club.
For decades, thousands of hours of Giants media loomed around the Bay Area and the country, ticking closer to their expiration dates. The organization's mission to digitize every second of it is a once-in-a-lifetime effort. The Legacy Project.
So yeah, that's the project in a quick 4-minute summary. So as you saw in there were tape storage lockers. We had 3/4 inch. We had film. We had everything. Initially, we thought we had 11,000 assets, and we ended up having 16,000 assets. There are a lot of clips that we showed in this video that we had never seen before, and as you know, I had been there since 2000. There's a lot of clips I'd never even seen before. The cool part is there were a lot of pieces of content that essentially had been transferred from film to beta to SD that we then up-converted to HD down the road. So there was stuff that I was seeing now in 2K, 4K resolution that I had never seen before. So there was a lot of cool discovery, and I guess segue back to why we're here, this project became pretty enormous. And as I said before, we thought we could log it ourselves in a year and have interns do it. But we realized that this was a pretty massive project, which is why we have Veritone and cutting edge alt systems here, because it definitely supported this big idea in getting it off the ground.
Yeah, I mean, a couple things relative to indexing. Obviously, we were able to take advantage of how cheap storage and compute have gotten, right? So the benefit of big cloud storage, very cost-effective storage, it sort of laid the groundwork for us to do this. AI is really fascinating with how advanced it's gotten, how accurate it's gotten. That if you look at this footage, I mean, a lot of the faces aren't that clear. So if you're thinking about just running facial detection, may not be good enough. But if I can combine facial with OCR, analyzing the number or the logos on the screen or different elements, you can start to look at it through different vectors and be able to find exactly what you're looking for. So we work with CBS News and their entire archive. I mean, it's huge. Goes back to before the Apollo moon landing. But it's also current content. We were talking about it earlier, and that, again, because digital is so cost effective, leave the cameras running. Right? You never know what fans are going to be really interested in. So it's no longer just about what's the clean feed after it's going over the air, but a lot of the, I would say, footage that's being produced, like at the US Open, which is a client of ours. I mean, all that potential content, which you thought you would just put on the editor floor, could be fodder for great fan engagement. So again, AI we view as just a cost-effective tool that allows you to harvest this content and make it readily available. So he's gonna. So Sig's gonna walk through the workflow itself and go through the details.
So all the ankle bones and leg bones. Paul, is it true though that somebody opened up a tin of film and found the 1935 World Series?
Yes, Sig. How did you know that?
That wasn't scripted. That's true. So
yeah, there were a lot. There were a lot of things we uncovered that were pretty cool.
Yeah, that's right. So one of the things I'm passionate about are workflows, and they're kind of the way that as an systems integrator, we get to be creative, if you will. And so instead of using words, we get to use manufacturers and tools and technology to kind of tell the story. And so when Paul asked us to kind of repurpose, and preserve actually all of their assets for 60 years, we were able to leverage our history and our experience and all the manufacturers to kind of create a workflow. So I'm just going to walk you, I won't get too out in the weeds here, but I want to walk you through a bit of how all of this actually works. So first of all, we have a lot of different sources. 16,000 tapes, about every format you can possibly imagine. Formats that were probably invented before some of you were born. But in this case, we're using film is going to be scanned up to 2K, and video will be digitized at 1080, ProRes HQ. That's our codec of choice. And what happens then, this is all done at Iron Mountain. So we did a bunch of research and work on behalf of the Giants to discover the best vendor to digitize and preserve all of these assets. We came up with Iron Mountain, and so Iron Mountain will do this work for us, and ultimately will ship to the stadium, for the Giants stadium, LTO7 tapes that have the data on them. And they'll also create a FileMaker database with the tape and the spline name and all that sort of stuff that in a moment we'll integrate with Veritone. And essentially what happens from there, that comes on-prem, and then it gets loaded into a big robotic tape library called a SpectraLogic T950. Holds about 920 of these tapes. Each one of these tapes can hold about 6 terabytes of data, right? So we're talking about a lot of data here. And I think the scale of your project is about 2 petabytes. Is that right?
Yeah, I think that's what we were forecasting.
Right, okay.
So, and we're about 50% of the way done, too. We started this, I think, in earnest in July of 2018.
Yeah. So the scale is enormous here. And essentially what we'll do at that point is load it into the autoloader. there's a product called Black Pearl, which is basically, I like to call it a kind of a digital preservation tool, if you will, and essentially it manages, it's a gateway between interfaces and sources and your targets or destinations. In other words, it's the data mover and the gateway to tape storage, to cloud storage, to on-prem storage, if you will, and all that sort of stuff. Once we've loaded all the data into the tape library and it's managed by the Black Pearl, then through a browser, a user will actually grab the data that they want and move that to what we call Tier 1 storage. It's fast, high-speed editorial storage that all of the video editors can work off of. And from there, if I can see, at that point, what we do then is we'll run it through Telestream Vantage, which is a tool, a workflow and transcoding appliance that will actually transcode the files into 10 megabit H.264 files. Those then get uplifted into the cloud, into an AWS account or bucket that is managed by Veritone that we'll talk about in just a moment. And from there, we'll actually then run some cognitive workflows on that and try to get our speech to text sort of transcriptions, our facial recognition. We can do OCR and all sorts of other stuff. And the end game at some point will be that we're going to bring that back into an on-prem workflow where we have asset management so that all of this rich metadata that Veritone is capturing for us gets loaded into asset management. So the editor can now just search for, home run, Willie Mays catch, this particular year, that particular game, and there's the file, right? And you don't have enough manpower. What was the calculation for how many people and
well,
how
I think
many
we said 13 for a year, working 40 hours a week straight through, but I think we probably need more people.
I think so, right. So, so that's where we're going to leverage the tool set and what the benefits of what AI can bring to us. So,
I think one thing to note is there are some people are very binary in their opinion on leaving my content on-prem, or is it okay to take a proxy versions and move it to the cloud? Okay, we're at a point now where we don't really care. So if you're looking at indexing your content and you want to do it on an on-prem environment, we can deploy a lot of the AI models on-prem, so the content doesn't even have to leave. If you are okay with going to the cloud, obviously speed and scalability is easier to maintain in the cloud. But as you touched on right there, we're not talking about necessarily moving the original high-res files. We're talking we create proxy versions of it, right? So there's some level of security there. But again, you can get a lot of the same quality metadata from a proxy file versus having to go back to the very original source. So wherever you plan on running cognition and introducing the AI layer, we can obviously work through groups like Cutting Edge and Alt Systems.
It's my turn, huh? So I think it's definitely important to note that that this project it grew pretty quickly. Like I was saying before, we were just throwing a tape in every now and then, intern would log it. But the reason why all these players need to be involved is we had so much content coming in at just breakneck speeds, and unfortunately and fortunately enough, we started this project at a time when we lost a Hall of Famer. Willie McCovey passed away, Frank Robinson passed away, one of our owners passed away. We have next year, we're celebrating 20 years at Oracle Park. And we also, this last year, we had our 1989 team reunion. So we had a lot of cool opportunities to leverage this content and get it out there. I mean, why we're all here is the streaming. So we had a lot of opportunities to get it out there and engage our fan base with some cool stories that they had never seen before. And I guess that's really speaks to that last bullet point there, because what you also have to remember while we're talking about streaming, we still have a big video board in our center field that we have to entertain our fans and create an experience for them. And all this content obviously gets leveraged. Give you highlight 1989, we brought the team in for a reunion. We were able to go back through a lot of those game tapes and pull old commercials and got sponsors like Coke or whoever to agree to allowing us to play these old 89 commercials. So then that way, we altered the game experience to kind of be a throwback back to 1989. And a lot of that was obviously leveraged because we had the go-ahead, the green light to make this project executable.
I think the number of use cases, and we'll just kind of wrap up in a couple minutes here, is how do you get more yield? I mean, you're making an investment digitizing all this. You're making an investment of running cognition and creating that metadata layer. I mean, there's so many use cases once you have that insight. We're talking obviously heavily about search and discovery, right? Surfacing great content that fits, a fan base. Targeted advertising is a big one, right? What's inside the content? How do I associate relevant Coca-Cola ads with the right type of content at the right time? So again, the value of digitizing it, the value of putting it into addressable and scalable cloud, the value of indexing it with quality, highly accurate metadata affords you the ability to do a lot or serve a lot of different use cases cost effectively, right? So,
I'll just do a unsolicited plug for Paul here that, what a service he's done, right? 60 years was about to get lost here. And fortunately, he had the vision and the foresight to actually say, let's preserve all of this content. So thank you, Paul, for that, right? Future generations are going to love you.
Yeah, hopefully.
It'll be instead of McCovey Cove, it'll be Paul Hodges Cove, right?
I don't think that'll happen, but I appreciate it, Sig.
Any quick questions? We have a few minutes.
Yeah, I got a use case I was wondering if you guys could address, which is content ratings for film libraries. So, for example, a lot of these digital streaming services want us to submit or want content providers to submit ratings like TV or MPA ratings. But a lot of the content, either one, they weren't rated. The second is that they're submitting a different version of the same film that needs to be re-reviewed to see if it meets the rating. And then the third is that what might have been okay then is not okay now, or vice versa. So has anyone talked to you about that use case?
Yeah, cover that one, please, yeah.
That's a pretty popular use case. So many different ways of doing that. Obviously, if you talk about brand safety or objectionable material, whether it's sexual in nature or profanity. I mean, you go back, we're doing a lot of work with the NFL films, and some of these interviews are awesome, but highly inappropriate for today's consumption. You really need to come up with rule sets. And so let's just hypothetically say I have a lexicon of keywords and phrases that I think are objectionable today. Whether I'm getting those from the IAB standard, right, for brand safety, you can import those and build a model, and if systematically run through all the content, pulling out where those key, objectionable keywords and phrases may be. Physical attributes, right? Nudity. I mean, all these things now you can track with machines to quickly surface those up. Now, everything has a level of accuracy, right? So I like to say is what AI today is really good at is greatly augmenting the human effort and making it much more efficient. But again, if this is up to your job, submitting a piece of content that may have one slang word in it that isn't appropriate, there will be a human in the loop layer at some point, but you've made the process incredibly efficient. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, just quick follow. What was the order of magnitude in terms of the cost savings that you realized?
Getting into this whole project, I guess the cost savings, I don't really know how to answer that other than I guess we kind of approach this as I was given a big check to have this done. Luckily, our owner took this as more of a nostalgic, emotional, let's save this stuff, and he really believed in just preserving it as well as allowing us to have the access to it. So I was fortunate enough that it wasn't kind of giving rails to try to find ways to be so cost effective. But I think bringing in an AI partner rather than also having interns sit there and log stuff, which, I mean, I was an intern logging way back in the days too, and I wouldn't trust myself versus what we're getting from a machine that, I think that other slide said, our entire library could be done in 1 month versus an entire year. But I guess the project kind of grew in scope, as I said earlier, just it got big. We didn't realize how many layers and everything we needed to think through, which is why we have a big team. It's not just me up here talking about it.
Yeah, and the ROI isn't figured out yet. It's still to be determined, right? So that, in other words, we've done all the work now, but now we have 60 years of legacy documented and preserved. We can monetize that and take advantage of that, for the next 100 years, right?
And I think there's cost savings, and then what's the opportunity to generate revenue, right? So there's two factors. For example, CBS News, very similar project, we've only even digitized 2% of their entire historical index library, right? Now the yield we're able to get just with that 2% is pretty substantial. Obviously, this is the 50th anniversary of the moon landing, and you can sort of parlay that into opportunities. So I challenge people to think of, if you have that quality accurate index, don't just look at the potential cost savings against manual human labor, but what's the revenue potential as well. I think you need to look at both factors.
Yeah, that's a great point, because that's what we're trying to figure out now. Other sponsors that we can layer in, or just, as I said earlier, impacting the fan experience is a huge piece too. Trying to draw people into the ballparks.
Right?
Sure. Yeah, I'm curious if you, I guess it's for Ryan, but how much did you create like a sort of layer of smarts around how baseball works, such that you could determine, oh, man on first, et cetera, and kind of actual game content situations? Yep. Did you go ahead.
A little. I mean, we haven't introduced it to them, but finding a score bug, any type of derivative of a score bug where it shows up. There's models now that can quickly find, even if it hasn't been pre-trained on like the look and feel of a score box, whether it's a digital overlay or it's actually in the background in the footage itself. So that's an example of models you can deploy. Motion, I would say, is still in the works. So there's a challenge for us to say, I mean, baseball is interesting. I mean, a quasi, a boring home run doesn't get a lot of airtime. I want a spectacular home run where it's a full extension. So you look at basically the angles, right, between your shoulder, your elbow to your wrist. And so there's a lot of things they're doing in football. They're going to automate those things. That all being said, most conservatively is just look at numbers, like logos, and elements like that is probably the most consistent. But there are a ton of companies and startups that are trying to come up with models. And just a little plug, if they do have a model, you can plug it right in. They don't even have to change their stack working with Veritone. That if somebody comes up with that model, they can add it post-fact into their stack and then rerun their content at a cost-effective basis.
And I would only say this project is unique, where a lot of it is old game tapes, where probably some of that data isn't needed, and documentary content and all this other kind of footage, where that kind of level of smarts isn't really needed on this project per se. But unless like looking forward and we wanted to kind of, impact the fan experience today with what game is happening tonight, I think that's where it starts to get cool.
You monetize this with the current broadcasters. So-and-so just broke the record set by Willie Mays in 1804, and can they access your library to pull up that footage, and can they, scoreboard operators, do the same thing? And to follow up on his question, are you applying those metrics to the exit velocity of Bobby Thompson's home run, et cetera, so that you can call stuff up by event, by play, either in the broadcast truck or in the in-game infield truck, and then how far back can you go? You keep saying 60 years, but what about when they were like, before they moved to San Francisco?
Yeah, so I'll go backwards, I guess. No, so 60 years. That's basically because that's the oldest asset we had. Baseball, as you saw on there, I think the Giants were very progressive in the 80s, that they had Giants Vision, and that kind of led to Sports Channel, and they started to own their own rights and broadcast their own games. So that's where we have a lot of footage in the 80s. Baseball in general, I think their library kind of starts earnest in the 90s. So we go back a little bit, but because there were so many games, it was less frequent of having a lot of content. So there's films scattered throughout here, the years that make up that 60 years. So that home run, yeah, we have that obviously on film in there. So that's where it goes back. But I think one of your other questions was related to
Access to the material that you can have cataloged and all of that from a current broadcast.
Yeah.
From a current broadcast, as well as the stadium guide, if they're trying to illustrate, again, the first time since this record was set, whenever, by whomever, doing that.
Yeah, so that's where a lot of this content gets leveraged, is in those kind of examples, or when a player comes back, or we hold reunions. So in my world, it's basically filling content for our social channels as well as our game entertainment. We have a relationship with our RSN and our broadcaster, but it'll take a little bit before they can obviously get in there and start using it, I guess, as I'm thinking, like your interface in the web app aspect
Yeah,
of it, they could pull that stuff
a division of
pretty quickly.
Veritone is, it's called Veritone Digital. So if you watch the end of Sports Center, for example, you'll see the credits. So the U.S. Open, SEC football, NCAA, they come to our gateway, the same one they're using, and that's where they pick up their content. So if you have the rules, if you have the contract, like Yahoo Sports or somebody to go access that content, they're actually using the same digital media hub platform that they're using internally to pull that editorial content specifically for those shows or forms of engagement.
But to answer your question, yes, we're going to leverage this stuff for the scoreboard, for storytelling, for just nostalgic purposes on our social channels and in park. For the film? So I think that example was just for film, and I think we chose 2K because of where the resolution was of the 16 millimeter. It just wasn't as cost effective to go to 4K. It was going to add a lot, and we weren't going to pick up much more data from that 16 millimeter film, which is why we chose 2K. So I think that example, that flow was essentially for a film.
Yeah, it's 2048 by 1556, which fits the form factor of like 35 millimeter film and that sort of stuff. So it was a logical choice.
But I think
with
30
this amount of data too, we want to be not overshoot in terms of 4K resolution is going to take up a lot more space too, a lot more real estate.
it just wasn't needed.
But did you do any color correction or image enhancement of the old quad stuff and kind of 60s-ish bad color TV? Was there any imaging sharpening enhancement done with the AI?
Not with the AI. That part was done actually by a person at Iron Mountain. Essentially, there are I think beta tapes. The 3/4 inch were probably the most tapes we had. Film. It's going to take this one guy who does the whole thing a year and a half to go through all our films, to scan them, color correct, and then send them along in their file format. So one guy is actually going through there and taking care of all that stuff by hand.
I think we're out of time, but I appreciate everybody coming today. Hope you have a safe drive home. Thank you.